hear me now? All right. Thank you, David. And thank you all for coming for something as archaic as poetry. I've been to some poetry readings, and I've noticed that sometimes there's a little ambiguity on the part of the audience about applause, because we're culturally trained to applaud after every little performance. And that's all right for operas and stuff, but you know, these are little, pretty short poems, most of them, and along about the 56th one, you're going to start flagging down, and I'm going to get depressed because you're not applauding. So, for me, I don't expect you to applaud after every poem. You can save it up, give me a thundering ovation. But, you know, express yourself if you feel a need to at any time. You know, like get a real job or anything you feel like you need to say. That's fine. Anybody who grows up, let me do some of my stuff now. Anybody who grows up in this part of the world has to come to some kind of terms with space. Now this is I'll start with a poem called This Sky. This is the sky I belong to. Those used to embrace of forests or buildings find difficult purchase here, as if they might slip anchor, pull slowly up with nothing to grab or slow the diminishing rise into that ceaseless round. Every step they take, a prayer to gravity. Some need this upside down ocean of wind, waves gentle to reckless, and at flood tide rattling the laces of their shoes. When you see only sky in every direction but down, you are put in your place, equal to the mosquito who claims the same resounding blue only once upon this time of a sky to be lived in. I grew up in Salina, and when I was a kid, they had a big billboard sign as you came into town from the east, and it said, "Welcome to Salina, gateway to the Rockies." Had a painting of the Rocky Mountains. And even as a kid, I was kind of embarrassed for my town. So, is this all they can say? But, and you know, the sweaty dad driving the family out to Pikes Peak, on about Goodwin, is thinking, "You gateway my ass." Maybe even buy coal. Crossing the plains. In the back seats of small cars, children count billboards, breathing slow. Poised for night on the flying decal, ear of corn, 10 feathers weight. Bands of watery heat dance ahead. At your knee, the foam of a disc jockey's mouth. If there is a lady in the car, she sleeps. She knows this road by heart. Sooner or later, the black lines say, like this skunk who dreamed of other fields and now lies scattered, everyone has got to cross this unknown land, this blue, resounding sky. Let's see, here's one called Inconvenient Lies. To say the bottom fell out of the corn market might explain it to some, but the woman ringed by 8 children, fed 1 ear of corn after another into the iron stove that winter. The stock market as mysterious as Dakota wind, and wept at burning good food cheaper than wood to keep warm. Nothing but prairie surrounds the red-faced man running over stony ground, knowing even if he reached somewhere, the best would be too little, and the girl with the rattlesnake bite going dark in his arms will not come back. Those moments long gone, except for me and now you. And we might wonder, in our modern way, what's the problem? Kill all the rattlesnakes, eat all the corn, case closed. But those were necessary lives, before convenience was exalted, when our grandmothers honored food with their tears, and against fate, our grandfathers continued to run. The artist Paul Klee defined art as job of art was to make the familiar strange and the strange familiar. I like that a lot. And I think that's can be used for poetry as well. I've talked in other poems about the danger of names, how once we learn the name of something, we're in danger of just not really perceiving it anymore, but now we know what to call it. So we only need to look at it long enough to identify it. Here's a poem called Untitled. And writing this, I got to thinking about all the titles that we gather up as we move through life, and some of them we're stuck with, like male, Caucasian. Others we choose, Baptist, alderman, city commissioner, assistant manager, president, elk, whatever. I think there's a danger too, if we get too many of these titles wound up, pretty soon we start believing this abstract construction that that's who we are, and we forget that we are not that. Those are just titles, untitled. In shifting leaf shadow, a little bird of 1,000 browns lifts one white eyebrow. It comes like all good education as a surprise when being shines through labels. Wind becomes a color hard to recognize. A heartbeat you might once have called your own appears without history or promise in the eye of a nameless bird. I like history. And sometimes I like to make it up. This is called the invention of the doorway. The wall came first. People soon got tired of taking down the rocks, going in, then putting the rocks back up again. A person had a thought. What was needed was a hole in matter, she said. Long after the people had stoned her to death, they began to consider the idea. When it was found to work, the scariest person claimed it and called it doorway. This person had power, but the tribe had killed its thinker. The door was not invented for another 500 years. In this modern world, when the senses are bombarded with all kinds of input, you really kind of wonder what chance of a poem got anymore. Maybe that's why I wrote this. It's called Why You Should Read This Poem. Because it contains no advice. Because you're here now, somehow finding it, and completion is its own reward. Because it requires no proof of purchase, ownership, or identity. Because in the victory of excess, someone must travel small and light. Because it doesn't ask you to save the world, but believes you will. Private property. The chunk of butter passed from hand to hand around the campfire meal became equal parts hair, grease, and dirt, and ran down the diner's arms. And so the butter dish was invented. The butter could go round unhandled. But now diners chased the butter around the plate with their mouths until they got a bite and passed it on, and the butter was rendered as unattractive as before. It was then a radical postulation was made. Butter could exist as fragments of itself, resulting of the invention of the butter knife to cleave and claim one's own butter too dirty by oneself. Here's a poem called Lucky. Two men in jeans and t-shirts walk a late afternoon sidewalk singing about a woman who spent the night in the pines. Nearing a house with patchy yard, a tricycle, rusting lawn chairs, where a man in tan pants, scuffed work boots, small belly, in a strap undershirt, dark hair uncombed, holds a burning Lucky Strike in one hand, the thumb of the other pressed on the end of a hose where water sprays the scattered grass. Two men stop singing as they pass. One man continues watering. All eyes meet. One smiles. You don't know how lucky you are. 3 men laugh. One at fortune, one at ignorance, one because he knows. Here's a poem called What the? ... When I was a kid, that's what all the bad guys said in the comic book. And they got the gun shot out of their hand. What the? And so I thought that's what you said when you were confused. What the? The word balloon above the astounded face of the bad guy whose gun Kid Colt has just shot out of his hand always said, what the? 2 dots and an exclamation point. Ditto the villain's thought bubble when Batman fell on him, or if they were really surprised, caps, no dots, and extra points. What the? Obviously an expression of great shock and dismay. So when I slopped my Kool-Aid at a friend's house and appropriately said, what the? I was surprised as his mother charged the scene, spatula held rigidly before as if to ward off, what did you say? I repeated it in monotone. Yes, and what were you going to say next, young man? I had no answer. Comic books had failed me. What the had a strange power to disturb adults. I kept it in my repertoire, though it was years before I learned the natural conclusions. But I liked those dots. The final unknowable unknown was perfect blank confusion itself. No doubt it had been uttered by every innocent color, creed, or underdog ripped from bed, every warrior struck, and a select few of the famous General Custer, for example. What the? Even my president appears to be thinking it much of the time. So when our assumptions are shot out of our hand, forget about filling in the blank, our disbelief rightly beyond expression, as Captain Contradiction drops on us like a shroud. What the? Comic book believers, let us remember and credit that 2-word howl. When lies and money equalize, humans claim to speak for God. The mind's eye chokes full of things. What the? At the very least, when we call out to the cosmos our startled query, it lets everyone know that we know something is wrong. Earth sold down the river painted blue, blue skies curdle yellow. What? All together now. Are there any questions or insults that we can deal with? Any kind of...
Thunderous applause?
Sir?
Thunderous applause, maybe?
Hey, cool.